Hello, hello. So I wanted to talk about releasing cords of attachment today. First of all, I'm going to describe what cords of attachment are and what are some signs that you might have certain cords of attachment in your reality. And if you are ready to, how to free yourself from such cords of attachment. Okay. So first of all, before I discuss what cords of attachment are, I just want to welcome folks who are coming in, and I want to just say for anybody who catches this live in this now moment or in the pre-recording that I share, I just want to say I hope you're thriving. And if for whatever reason you feel like you're more in survival mode and less in the thriving mode, just know that at any point in time, you can reclaim your power on all realms and dimensions. And that's kind of what this conversation is about. And we're going to do that today by discussing cords of attachment. Okay, so to really understand what cords of attachment are and how they show up in our realm, we have to talk about the nature of the false matrix. So a lot of y'all may have heard me talk about the false matrix. So I'm going to break down what I mean when I say the false matrix. So if you can imagine that your world is a web, okay? So webs have an interesting way of being perceived in our reality. Spiders in general have an interesting way of being perceived in our reality. They can have a very positive connotation and they can have a very negative connotation, okay? So when I discuss the false matrix and the toxic web of the false matrix, I am talking about the negative polarity of the web and the negative polarity of the spider. But there is another side, and we'll discuss that as well. So the false matrix is this false web work, these false senses of attachment. If you ever feel like you are obligated to certain beings and you don't get a sense of joy by being in their presence, and yet you feel as though you have an obligation to them and you cannot free yourself from that entanglement, you are within the toxic web of the false matrix, and you are connected to cords of attachment based upon karmic storylines from your ancestry. And I'm here to tell you that you can change this if you want to, all right? It does require you peeking beneath the surface and going underneath the hood of things, right? And so when we start perceiving things like the energetic field, when we start perceiving things like cords of attachment, we got to get out of the 3D and what's happening in the third dimension and going into the unseen realms, okay? So if I were to describe the false matrix in an analogy, so one analogy I used just now was a web, a toxic web. You know, you're in some Black Widow's web, all right? You don't really want to be there. You also don't know how to leave, all right? You're in the toxic web of the false matrix. That's one example. I also want to give you another example. So the false matrix can show up as a stage, all right? Imagine that you wake up one day and you realize that your world is not really your world. You're actually playing a role, okay? And on top of that, you realize that somebody else wrote the script for you. And you just kind of gained consciousness that you're in this script. And you may have actually, maybe you also could be the director of this script, but there's a lot of terms and conditions around how you're able to direct this play that you're in. So if you can imagine you're like some big Hollywood director, right? And you are in charge of creating this movie, and this movie is your life. And so it's like, yeah, you have creative control. You're creating this movie of your life. Woohoo, good for you. But then you find out that there's like all these restrictions. It's like, actually, you have to cast this actor for this role in the movie of your life, just because like that's just kind of how it is. You have to use this fashion designer for all the clothes because we kind of already have a deal with them. So yeah, but you still have creative control. It's still your show. Don't worry about it. It's still your life. But then you find out there's all these terms and conditions. Like you have to use certain people to be in this world in your life. You may not get along with them on set or in your reality, but you're kind of stuck with each other because that's kind of what the powers that be have made it to be. that happens a lot of times in Hollywood, or that might happen a lot of times like at your job. If you are in a leadership position, right? Woohoo, I'm the leader. I got my pay raise. I got the fancy title. But then you find out like, oh wow, I'm held by all these different terms and conditions that I don't quite like, but I kind of have to go along with it because that's just the way things are. Okay, those are signs of cords of attachment. That's based upon karmic timelines. Those are things that you can shift, but in order to do that, it does require to see things as they are in that reality, and then also to decide to heal karma. So that's one thing, okay? Now, how do cords of attachment work? Cords of attachment are actually very hurtful to us energetically, and that also can manifest for us on the physical as well, okay? So when you feel bound by somebody because of codependent patterning, you feel like you have to give your life force away to this person on several different realms and dimensions, right? And you see them calling you and you're like, oh, this person. But for whatever reason, you got to answer the phone. Cord of attachment, okay? That depletion that you feel in the third dimension is also happening in an energetic exchange through that same cord of attachment. And your obligation to deal with this person that doesn't bring you joy, that brings you a lot of like drama or makes you feel bad about yourself, that's also happening to you on an energetic plane through that same cord of attachment. Now, until you release that cord of attachment, what happens is you are giving away your life force to that person, okay? And you know that based upon how depleted you feel by that person when you're on a call with them or you're in their presence. I don't know if you've ever had this like experience where you spent time with somebody and you literally felt so exhausted. You just felt so exhausted after. I remember a time when I was on, I just started awakening, and there was a really close friend in my life who I found out later was, we were in a very codependent relationship, and there was a lot of like energy harvesting going on. And I remember like one time I spent the weekend with her and felt so low, and I got to the point where I literally fainted, which has never happened before. I've never fainted before. And that's when I knew like that. And, you know, after doing some introspection on it, I was like, oh snap, I'm getting like straight up energy harvested. I got to do something about this. So you might have those sorts of things. Like if you feel lower in somebody's presence, there is a cord of attachment and you are subconsciously agreeing to having your energy siphoned on a variety of different realms and dimensions until you rewrite your script. So a lot of y'all may have heard me talk about soul contracts in different posts. And this is something I go into really deep work with folks one-on-one and then also on Patreon. So on Patreon, I'm leaking portions of my ebook on revoking soul contracts in the next couple of days in honor of the 4th of July, Independence Day. I'll be guiding folks through the process of writing their own Declaration of Independence. Your first step from releasing cords of attachments is to decide that you want to be sovereign, okay? To understand that there is way more than what meets the surface, right? There's a lot of stuff going on that you may not be able to see, taste, touch, feel, but it doesn't mean that it's not there, okay? And if you are ready to reclaim your power from codependent relationships, and codependency is just where you're giving more, and you're giving to your detriment. It's okay to give if you're giving from a place of joy and pleasure, but if you're giving from a place of obligation and depletion, that is not love, okay? As much as they have told us that was love within the false matrix, it's not love. I'll give you an example. You know that Disney movie, The Little Mermaid? If I can think of any movie that's like the most codependent patterning, it would have to be that. Literally, this mermaid falls in love with this sailor dude, Eric, I think his name is, and basically feels like she needs to completely change who she is in order to be with him, and basically maims herself in order to do so. And we got that kind of programming thrown in our faces in childhood or as we were growing up. And that was supposed to be love, right? You're supposed to do that for the people that you love. You're supposed to go above and beyond, even if it means literally putting yourself into danger in order to do that. Okay, so that is something that we must deprogram in order to release cords of attachment. When you are feeling guilty about cutting ties with somebody, even though they don't make you feel good and they're taking of your energetic essence, that is a form of codependency. That is not love. If you feel as though you need to stay in somebody's presence or in somebody's reality out of a sense of obligation, that's not a relationship that's based on love. It's based upon cords of attachment and your energy's getting harvested through that relationship. Okay? I go through this all the time with folks. It's very difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. Unlearning codependency in our society is one of the hardest things that we will need to do. But to get out of this toxic web of the false matrix, where we feel as though we're constricted by our relationships, where we're not able to show up as our full selves, where we feel like we need to hide, or we need to hide our light under a bushel, or we have to keep ourselves small to make sure that other people don't feel comfortable. You're enmeshed in a toxic web and you are consenting to your energy getting harvested. So the first thing you want to do is make the decision to revoke soul contracts. This in itself is a journey. Okay? I go through this all the time. I've gone through it on my own path. It takes a while for it to fully click. Oh, I consented to this. Whatever is being experienced right now in my reality that I'm not a fan of, that I feel oppressed by, on some realm or dimension, I created this and I consented to this. That's hard to get to, okay? Because it's a lot easier to feel like a victim. Like, why are they doing this to me? Or why is this always happening to me? But if you are ready to get past relationships based upon codependency and obligation, and to feel more pleasure and joy in your daily reality, and to attract people, places, things that bring you more pleasure and joy in your daily reality, then you will need to rewrite your script. And that means that you reclaim your creator power. So many ways our creativity and our dreams have been siphoned from us within the false matrix. We were taught that our imagination didn't really mean anything. We were taught that, you don't want to keep your head in the clouds. You don't want to dream too much. You want to be realistic. This was all ways that energy harvesting was normalized, okay? So first you got to acknowledge that you're in this toxic web, and then you got to decide that you have the power to release yourself from that web. The next thing you need to do is transcend guilt and fear. The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be afraid to leave certain toxic relationships. The fear is going to come up, fear of being alone, fear of being ostracized, fear of being told that you're evil or that you don't care, etc. All the ways that our social groups can make us feel bad when we decide that we want to choose another path. So anticipate that the fear is going to come and start alchemizing it. One thing that you can do is you can set your intentions right before bed. That fear is cleared from your consciousness each night as you dream, okay? And you'll start noticing that the stuff that you were fearful about, it becomes less and less. I'm not saying that fear completely goes away, like there's levels to this, but you will get to a point where you're not so concerned or fearful about what others think about you. And then you're going to go through these periods of guilt. So you're not going to necessarily be able to avoid guilt as you get out of this toxic web of releasing cords of attachment which no longer serve you. So I'm not going to tell you like, oh, don't feel guilty. No, you're going to feel guilty. Guilt and shame is natural. It's going to come up. And that's because guilt and shame were used or have been used as energy harvesting tools to keep us enmeshed in relationships and situations that are not of our highest good. This was done as a form of coercive control. And this gets me to karma and clearing karma as we release cords of attachment, because each cord of attachment is held by a karmic record, okay? And I say this all the time, karma's not bad. Everybody has karma, okay? There's no human being on this planet, even the most ascended master has karma on some realm or dimension, okay? This is just something, if you're a human, if you're living in this, in a flesh suit, you got karma to contend with, okay? And the earth is ascending. She's releasing karma. She's releasing karmic records. She's also ascending out of codependency. So, you know, this whole thing where we're like, oh, the earth is our mother and she's always giving to us and she's always taking care of us. She's actually not going to do that for everybody moving forward. She's actually going to be kicking a lot of species off the planet who have been participating in a lot of energy harvesting, or that may be too difficult for her to carry. That doesn't mean she's not loving. That doesn't mean she's not abundant. But it gets to a point where every person, being, species must release certain cords of attachment which are out of alignment with ascension, growth, and development. And the earth is doing the same thing too, okay? So if, you know, energy harvesting is happening with the earth to such an extreme where, like, literally it's either her or certain species, she's going to choose herself. And that doesn't mean she's not loving. It means that she loves herself. She has to choose self-love, okay? And a lot of us have thought that we needed to forego loving ourselves and that we had to forego having self-esteem in order to be accepted in our society. And that was a form of programming that we are dismantling. And we do that through releasing codependent cords of attachment. So you can easily tell if you're in a codependent relationship, if you need space and the person that you need space from makes you feel bad about needing space. It's real easy, actually, okay? Know that the feelings are going to come, the emotions are going to come. You're going to have to alchemize that process. But if you feel shame or guilt in any way in that relationship, and the shame and guilt escalates and gets projected more at you as you take your space, that's a codependent relationship. There's a cord of attachment between you all. It's based upon karma. And in that karmic exchange, you are subconsciously consenting to giving away a lot of different things on the spiritual realm. Sometimes it's your dreams, literally. Sometimes you are agreeing to take on somebody's disease, somebody's depression, somebody's karma. Okay, this stuff goes really deep. Okay, so a lot of exchanges are happening, and this might be a subconscious agreement between your ancestries because of something else that happened in the past. Okay, so in order to release the cord of attachment, you want to set the intention to complete karma. All right, so we do need to complete with karma. Karma doesn't mean like you're eternally damned in relationships that are harmful for you. So that's another falsehood. Sometimes it's like, well, I must have just done something really bad, so I just have to suffer in this lifetime with all of these like traumatic relationships. No, you don't have to do that either. You acknowledge that the karmic records are there. You set the intention to clear karma. Where is this trauma stemming from? And then you're able to release the relationship with ease, okay? You don't have to suffer. You don't, like that's the biggest thing I could say. You are worthy of pleasure. You are worthy of joy. You are worthy of abundance. And yet, in order to get to those things, sometimes we got to release the baggage. We got to release the codependency. And we release the programming which said that we are unworthy. Okay, this is why we reclaim pleasure, joy, and creation as we exit the false matrix. All of the things that we felt bad about while we were in this system, we reclaim those things. So as you release the cord of attachment, you always, like, the universe hates a void. Okay, if you don't fill the void with something, void space will be filled by something else. Okay, so if you want to release a certain relationship, you integrate something that's more joyful in your presence. So let's say you've been in a serial monogamous and you've just been in like toxic relationship after toxic relationship. Maybe you're considering divorcing somebody. Maybe you just have gone through a divorce, right? And so a lot of times when you go through divorce or a really large breakup, it can be a form of an ego death. It can feel like a part of you is literally dying because you gave so much of your life force and essence, not only into the relationship, but the institution of the relationship, right? And so you got to reclaim your life force in essence. And so this is a really great opportunity to find another part of yourself that maybe you left behind within that relationship. Okay, so it's a great opportunity for you to cultivate your spiritual gifts. A lot of us are waking up right now and we're realizing that we're intuitive, and we're realizing that we're healers, and we've tried to like put this part away from, like put it in a box or put it away from our daily reality, because we were told that if we were to embrace our healing potential, that we would be broke or that we would be ostracized, etc. Well, as you exit a codependent relationship, focus on self-development, focus on love, focus on rest. A lot of these codependent relationships that we've been programmed to be in have kept us away from peace of mind and rest. Take a bath, okay? I think if you are exiting a lot of shoulds and have-tos in your relationships, you reclaim space to have pleasure, all right? To be with yourself, to learn who you are outside of all of the shoulds and the have-tos, okay? So how do you release karma? You got to start seeing what the karmic patterns are. You can set the intention every day to start healing any karmic relationships that are starting to, that you might encounter any day. And we're always actually processing through karma. And I've mentioned this in some other lives that we're experiencing a quickening on the planet right now. So as the earth raises in frequency, all the baggage must go. So all of the karmic records are now coming up to be processed or alchemized. We have choices. We can decide not to process through the karma. We could just stay in the loops. We could just loop, trauma loop. That will not be sustainable. And just like we've seen in a lot of instances in creation, species who don't evolve and learn, they don't thrive, okay? So you can stay in survival mode and just keep perpetuating the loop, but you'll only survive for a certain amount of time, or your bloodline will only survive for a certain amount of time. But as the earth raises in frequency, she's becoming more magnetic. She is aligning with something that is called the Great Central Sun, not the solar sun. The Great Central Sun is underneath the earth. This is a whole other conversation to kind of go into. I know it debunks a lot of the stuff that we learned in school about our solar system. That's for a whole other life. But if you've been hearing murmurings that there is another sun, there's actually many other suns. There's many other great central suns, but we are aligning to a particular great central sun that we used to be in alignment with before many falls in human consciousness. What caused those falls in human consciousness? Electrical programming, angular programming, and interestingly enough, cords of attachment are actually very angular, okay? We're actually, as we ascend, we're going to experience more of a magnetic frequency, which is spiral, okay? It's going to be more rounded, more circular, more unity-based consciousness. And so that means our actual grid work is going to shift. So the codependent patterning that you're in, if you could just imagine a whole bunch of like X's and crosses and all that kind of stuff, like just in your field, right? And it's sucking away information, or you may be sucking away other people's information. Codependency is always a two-way street. It's just energy harvesting galore in a more electrical system. But as we start ascending and letting go of all that codependent patterning, it's going to change our DNA, especially as we start transcending the karma. We got to transcend the karma because all that the shoulds and the have-tos are held by karmic records that we have not resolved. But once we start resolving those karmic records, we can evolve, and then we evolve with the way of the spiral. And that's very circular. And it's not held by shoulds and have-tos, it's held by resonance. Who are we aligning with? Who are we resonating with, okay? That's just gonna happen naturally, just like magnets. If you think about things that are magnetic, they just naturally come together. There doesn't need to be any coercion. You don't need to loop a magnet in with shoulds and have-tos. It just naturally magnetizes, okay? And that's what we're gonna want to see our energy start doing as we ascend, is that. But in order to do that, we must let go of the codependent patterns that might be holding us back from what our soul truly wants to experience as we ascend. Okay, so to wrap things up, cords of attachment are keeping you in this web, this toxic web of the false matrix. I also refer to something called grind culture a lot, that y'all have heard me talk about. This need to constantly throw ourselves under the bus to achieve, to work ourselves to the bone in order to feel valuable and worthy in our society. A huge codependent pattern that we are transmuting as a collective. A lot of that is based upon slavery consciousness. And I don't just mean slavery from the most recent things that we're seeing as it relates to human trafficking or the transatlantic slave trade, etc. I'm talking about like all the way back to, there is a group called the Anunnaki. You can learn more about them. I actually have a download on my YouTube channel at the Goddess Keys. If you want to go more into that, there's a lot of patterning related to the Anunnaki, who did a lot to shift human DNA and create a slave race out of us. That's why some of us have to deprogram this need to constantly be on, to constantly be productive, because we were wired to do that. But that wasn't always in our lineage, and that wasn't always in our DNA, okay? But in order to clear that, we need to clear the karmic records of slavery, the ways that we may have been enslaved in our lineage, and the way that we may have enslaved others in our lineage. Sometimes we hold both lineages, okay? So that's something that we also are transmuting. And codependency is very much a slavery-based consciousness, and it keeps us enmeshed in this toxic web of the false matrix. But the earth is ascending. She's aligning with the magnetism of the great central sun. That will be more based upon resonance. It will be more based upon just alignment, okay? Joy, pleasure, flow, creativity, calling those things back, all right? And to do that, though, you want to clear karma and revoke soul contracts. So if you're looking for more tools and resources, there's a couple things I can suggest to you. So number one, I have a tier on my Patreon called Genetic Path Cutter. And essentially in this tier, I teach you my divination system, my genetic path cutting divination system. And you also get a reading on genetic path cutting from me once a month, and it'll show different karmic legacies that might need to be cleared. Karmic records are always coming up, just so you know. It's not like you just clear karma one day and you're like, I'm karma free, yay. No, it's hundreds and thousands of years of stuff that we're deprogramming. So it takes time, and we'll find that life becomes more fun and more joyful the more we release different karmic records. So I teach you the process of divining this for yourself. I do give readings, but I'm more of a fan of teaching folks how to do these readings for themselves. So I give you access to my divination system. You have readings with me as it relates to this divination system to your inbox once a month. And then you also have like access to tons of affirmations, subliminals, and meditations related to karma clearing, accessing your Akashic records. I'm all about teaching folks how to go into their Akashic records and clear storylines which no longer serve. And then you also have access to things around removing electrical programming through removing etheric implants, as well as revoking soul contracts. So it's a nice little warehouse of stuff to get you started on this journey of choosing to thrive instead of to survive within the false matrix. So that's one thing. I also do one-on-one coaching with folks if you're looking to go into a more deeper dive journey. And if you're interested in that, you can email me at heatherarcherconsulting@gmail.com. And I also have a tier on my Patreon called Ascension 360. It's not as extensive as the one-on-one coaching packages, but you do get a touch point with me once a month via phone, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have. And then you also get access to the genetic path cutter divination system and all the meditations, subliminals, affirmations. And if you are just seeking some more tools and resources and information, then subscribe to my YouTube channel at the Goddess Keys. And there's lots of free meditations on there, free subliminals and downloads around how to release the how of how to release yourself from codependent patterning, and not just in the physical, but in all realms and dimensions. I take all of the stuff I teach is from a multi-dimensional lens, all right? We're not just focusing in on cut off your toxic boyfriend. Like, no, cut off your toxic boyfriend and how are y'all courted in the spiritual plane, and what soul contracts do you need to revoke, etc., etc. Reclaim your energy across all realms and dimensions, okay? So multidimensionality is the name of the game. And I'm going to end it there at this time, y'all. I'm just sending you so much love, joy, peace, prosperity, and abundance until we meet again. Peace, everyone.